just has a title to do, checkbox for marking off when it's completed, an X for deleting them, the name of the two, how many tasks are left, a couple of filters for punish all of them, only the ones that haven't been completed or the ones that have been completed, and then a place to create your task or your two. So what we're creating here is the final result. You can remove a task, you can delete it, you can add it back, and if you refresh or close it, then it will still be here. And then of course this changes. Okay. Put this back up. So inside our box, we'll have a header. It's just going to have our title, which will be the class title, an ID title. So text online. Or if you've done this whatever way you want it to. It's a good idea to try to design your own first, and then come back here if you need some help. We have our title, we have these spans that we created, and the input section for creating a new to-do. Nothing will happen just yet, but that is most of the HTML in place. I'm going to go ahead and put these styles in my style.css. One more thing actually reminds me to put in this HTML because adding this is a link to CSS, and it already knows I expect it to be style.css. Okay. Now the container part I mentioned, we're going to make it display flex, because flex is great. Flex direction is going to be column, because we want the inside of the container to go from top to bottom instead of left to right, which is the default. And align items center would be 100%. That's off that one. Then our box have a width of 50%. So to be where most of our stuff is. Okay, we don't necessarily need extra space here. Our twos, let's take a cell about those. We want them to fill our box, so we're going to put a width of 100%. And secure the height of 20 pixels. All right. Then, so the same way I had it, we'll have each of the to-dos have a slightly different color. We give R2 a 10th child. We can select the even ones, we want to be gray. And the odd ones, we want to be gray. Okay. Then we can have our selected and our box. Those have order. 1 pixel solid black. I need to do there. So if you're wondering why I have the outline on the box, this is what I'm adding it. I'm also going to add it to the selected class. Selected will be for those filters. Whenever they click on, we want them to have a box around them to indicate what filter we press. Okay. Now we have a completed class. So to have text decoration line through. What this means is just the text will have line through. So some different options there. Not for italics. Tuple. We have a link you don't want, so that default styling gives you. And we have our flex, which of course is going to have display flex. And because we have flex around and flex between, there's different wizards if I content, I have them as separate classes, which I need to indicate. Around display content, around, and flex between content, space between. Okay, the title, we'll just keep it to the font size. 2, 10. The default would be 16 pixels. This will just make it twice that size. If there is any classes above that, it would be based on that because it's relative. Then we will have our text line. Simply will, you guess this text align center. Okay. The next one will be to-do list. Just want to do padding 0. The reason I'm doing this is just because if I don't, it'll put an amount on our to-do list without me wanting it. Let's see where that is. Right here, the unordered list selected with padding on there. We don't want that. Our form will give a margin top 26. I'll send here. Input, you can do this however you want it, but this is just exactly how I have shown you. Filters, I'm just going to have a pointer because we told them to be spans, so check that. Yeah, spans. So I just need to look right cursor over it, it will look like we can click on it. Now, unique button, Yeah, that's all our CSS. Now let's check that out. Okay, looks like something's not quite right here. So I'm going to, well, I'll show you on here. Let's check multiple resource. Next.js. Oh, now we don't have that yet, of course. Okay. I click on this. We got flex round selected. To oh, flex around spelled incorrectly in my HTML here. Flex around. No, flex around. That's better. Okay. The one other thing we have left is this text right here. Should have to do input. That should be an ID. Oh, ID. There we go. Now this is taking up full width that we want to. It's specified here to have a width of 100%, which fills the remaining space. That's our HTML and CSS in place, and we're just going to do one JavaScript file. We could have done more than one, but that's all I'm going to do for mine. And I will just call that, I'm going to call it main.js. And of course, I called it indexing here. You call the same in both places. Okay. So in our HTML, we want to, oh, you know what? We probably want to test out our unordered list here to make sure our to-dos look where we want them to. And that will show you what I structured them. So we're going to have a div with flex, between, and within that, we will have a checkbox. So that will be input. That's going to be text. And we want a span for our text. Assign to a button. And delete, this is our delete button here. Let's see how that looks. Oh, yeah, we did not want text, we want it to be a checkbox. There we go. Click, here's our 2, and here's our X. Okay. Now we tried some on-click stuff. Over here, we're going to have on-click. We're going to integrate a filter function. And this one's going to filter for everything, so not actually filter really. It'll just bring us back to having all of the items if we add filter to something else. So we'll also use the filter, but it's going to filter for active. Missing the closing one there. And I can just copy paste this. Okay. And for complete. Perfect. It's kind of a lucky thing, but doesn't want to do too long, so I did that. Okay, then whenever we click our plus button here, we're going to want to on-click there. We could do this through JavaScript, but to me it's clear what's going on if you click the on-click here. Just add to this. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do it the way I had that. Add to this. Add to this. With ES6, we can create our functions this way and assign it to a variable. And I'm going to need to get our to-do input. So if we go back here to input, that is our text for when we're entering a new to-do. Let's grab that to-do input equals document ID. And we're going to grab to-do input. And we have constant to-do. So we're going to decide what our structure is. I'm going to say name to-do input. And of course, you could try and do this function on your own before I finish this here. So you want to challenge yourself and see if you can figure out how to essentially add this, whatever is typed into our right here. Input field, you want it to go up here. When we click the plus. So give that a shot. I'm going to continue to mine out the way I did. So you want to pause here. If you want to try on your own first. Okay, so completed. It's false. You first add H2. Alright. So we're going to need to add an array to store our twos. So twos is going to be array. Bam. Twos. And I get to do's list. That one, so I'm going to put that here. I like that better. Push our name to. We also do .concat. But since we're doing const, we can't overwrite the original array. If we push to it, it'll accept that it's still technically the same array. We're just pushing a new thing to it. A new to in this case, which is an object with the name and completed. So And we're going to have some other functionality we'll need to implement. And I'll go ahead and do that. Let's just log this first to make sure we're working our to-do list. Whenever we click the plus, we want to see our new to-do. So we have this open, go to the console, some text. We have completed false and name. To-dos list. Pushing our new to-do has a name. Oh, we'll put the name as to-do input. We don't want it as that, we want as that value. There we go, that's better. Okay. That's what we want. That's working fine and dandy. I'm going to create a new function here or add to do element. What I need to do. I'm putting it separate because essentially this is just going to manipulate the DOM to have our to-do item added. We're just going to take some creating elements and different stuff that'll take a lot of space that I don't want to overcomplicate this original function with. So let's add to element equals new to, and here is where we can say const to do element equals, let's see, document create element, and we could tell it to add a div. But what if we want to tell it the class and stuff like that already without having to put it on too many extra lines? There's a way to make this look a little cleaner that I found, and that is going to try another function before we finish this one. I know, I'm crazy, but I'm call that create element with attribute. That's going to make it easier to add attribute at the same time. We're going to have a tag like our div, and we're going to have some options. And we're going to object.assign with document.create element like we did before. A div, and this is where we're going to pass the options. This allows it so that we can specify, for instance, if we were doing an input here, we wanted to tell it, okay, this input is going to be of type button, or it's going to be of type text, or it could have this class name or this on click. Then it makes it a little bit easier to do that because without it, we would have to say to item.onClick and specify all that stuff here, blah. And then to item.classList.add. That's all right, but I kind of like this way better. So you can do it that way if you want. So instead of doing create element, now we're going to call create elements with attribute. And we're going to tell it to do div and give it our information, which is in this case it's just the class list. Which is going to mean we're going to give this div a flex class, a flex between class, and a to class. So display flex, just the content, flex between, there's space between, and to, which is just output to do. Okay. For our next one, we're going to add those elements like we had in our HTML. So far we did this div. So we add the, okay, not that one, this div that we add to the on-order list, which is where we're going to put all our to-dos. Now we need to create these three things right here. They're going to have some on-click functionality too, like this on-click here. But then say delete to something like that. First thing we need to add our checkbox. Do checkbox. We'll use that. We just made again, create an input. It's going to have type checkbox. It's going to have checked to our new to completed on click to do. Okay, so what's happening here is we're creating an input that is type checkbox. We're going to have it be checked whenever this object, which has a name and completed value, is completed. We want it to have a check mark in the box in case that we add it and we want it to be true. Then we can do that. I mean, you can just put false here if you don't think that could be a problem. And then on click, this is going to be a function we're going to add. So, one second. All right. That's a to-do checkbox. Now we need span as the name of the to-do. So const to item name span, or do you want to call it? Elements with attribute. This is of course going to be a span. And it's going to have text x. Wait, not x. Delete. We want to do object or to do that is dot name. We're grabbing this right here. Then we want class list because we're going to add our classes, which is going to be to do object or new to do completed. If that is true, we're going to pass it completed as its class. Otherwise, we're going to pass nothing. Now let's create our to delete button. Type button. Oh, on bottom button. So we have an inner text, letter X, closing it. Class list. And just to know if you put class here, it's not going to say it properly. I'll give it a sign. You would need to have your option use class list instead of class. Okay, so this would be delete button because that's what we called it in our class in the style.css. It's going to need an on click, and it's going to call remove and create. Alrighty. And we just have to put it all together. To do item, to create at the top. You can add them all at once, so even by append. Add to checkbox, to item span, and to delete button. And finally, we need to have something to grab our unordered list. I'm going to grab it a couple of times, so in mine I have unordered list, goals, document, get element ID, which I'm going to use, and I call it to-do list. You can also do that create selector and then just do a dot here instead. It does the same thing. Lots of ways to do the same things. This is just one of them. So we just grab that unordered list now and append child to it. That way it actually puts our to-do item that we put all this stuff onto into the document object model, the DOM. And I see here we have an error, which is right here, because we're trying to semicolon. There we go. Okay. This is done. Now we want to do, well, maybe we can test that here. Let's check out what we've got so far. Test 2. Complete to-do is not defined on line 22. Oh, yes, we have not created all these things yet. But we could get rid of those for a second and see if that works now. There we go. But our button is looking a little wonky here. And why is that? Your text X, class list button. Odd. It's not putting our checkbox either. Okay, so we've got something not quite right here. Let's see what that is. Type checkbox, check to completed. Okay, I'll pause this for a moment here. Okay, that is because we passed div here and we wanted to tell it the tag specifically. Now if we go back and do this, now it appears what we wanted to. Because before it was assuming these are all going to be divs instead of putting what we wanted. So let's go ahead and put those back in and then fix this again. Okay, so we need to implement complete to do. So let's create a function for that. Let's use the event. So let's do const to do name equals v.target. Child nodes. It might sound like a lot of nonsense, but we are grabbing the event, and the event target is going to be what this is called on, which will be this input element. We're going to get its parent element, which will be the to-do item. And we're going to get the child node 1, which will be this to-do item name span. So if we had formatted this differently, we could make this work perhaps in a more fashionable way, but this will work here. Please let me know how you went about this. So to-do list. Now what we're going to do is make sure to mark it as completed. So to mark it as completed, we need to grab the array and go to to-dos list dot. What's that place here? Okay, find index. That is going to be a function that we pass an ES6 function to dot name equals triple equals name dot inner text dot completed equals the reverse of what it is currently dot completed. We're just moving that. Then we want to add our class to it, so to name dot class list, which will give it strike through. No, not strike through, right? Toggle completed. So back to our CSS. It's fine, completed. There's our line through. Okay. So we've done complete to do. We will add our remove to do, and then we'll test both. Let's go ahead and see exactly well, we'll see how these are working after. Okay, so const remove to do. Also going to take our event. And we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to copy and paste. Okay, we're going to do list dot splice, and splice removes elements from an array. If necessary, insert new elements in that place, returning the deleted elements. We're not going to need that returned. What we're trying to get rid of is the to do that we have clicked the X on, and all we need to do is take it out of our array. Let's do I call to-dos list? I did call to-dos list. Dot find index. So we're going to do something similar here. In fact, I think we can just copy that over. These two functions are pretty similar. Okay, so we're removing that, so we need to pass it to 1. Say we're just going to delete one spot from that index. So instead of using index of passing a number index, find index, you can pass that function. So you can go through that array and find the index that you need, which is a bunch here. Now let's use that event.target.parent element and remove that parent element, because that parent element represents the entire to this to item here that we've added everything onto. New function, all of our functions, change tasks left span. As list on what we're doing here as possible. You can explain that with less words, that's great. Just better to know exactly what it's doing just from the name. Just going to get our elements. And supposed to be tasks left. The ID will be tasks left. We're grabbing right here, tasks left. So we're going to change that number as we're adding and removing and completing our tasks. So we'll change the inner text of that element to be equal to, now we'll use string interpolation, get to list dot filter. We're going to filter for the ones that are not completed. And then tasks left. We're going to take the number, which is going to be filtered for to-dos that are not completed, and that's going to get us the correct number, because the ones that we have removed, it will of course not include in this dot length in our to-dos filtered dot length. That's not going to do anything yet though, because we need to put it into somewhere to be used. When do we want to use this function? Probably want to call it after our complete to-do is done. When we add a to, when we, well, that might be it for now. Let's give that a whirl, see what that looks like. And about to be going, okay. We add our test, we check, that is striking through like we want, we hit X, it's removing it, but it is also updating the number of tasks left. Oh, but if we check that, it is not changing the amount of tasks left. We probably want to get rid of this, so let's do that. Go to our HTML, get rid of what's inside our list by default. Let's check on where we are checking the box. Complete to, yeah, I'll need to call this function there as well. Go back. There we go, now you can see it changing. Perfect. Now we just need to add our filtering and our local storage so that it will remember the tasks that we have done and that we have left and add it. So one more function, filter. Yes, syntaxes are for people. I'm going to say remove to, also just make things a little less weird, because using a syntax, you don't have hoisting going on. Just do some funny business. So we're also going to remove to's function. That way we're filtering. We're not adding on to to's that we already have in there. We're just going to start fresh. Const remove to's. Yes, I know, it's another function. This one will simply be have a loop that will go through our unordered list. And if there's a first child, we're going to remove it. So unordered list, our first child. Now that one is being removed. Simple as that. Now we could do an if or a switch here. Let's try if. That sounds fun. If type equals all to-dos. And we're going to need to add as well. So let's add our get to-dos. Constant to-dos. Let's make sure it's not somewhere else. It's not. Equal to to-dos. To element. Our error is telling us that we did not put the arrow. We're saying for all of our to-dos and to-do array, which we could use this by default if we don't have one we're passing, but we're going to want to go specify something different in order to tell we're getting different to-dos, a different set of to-dos. We'll see that in a bit. We're going to add each of these objects that are in our to-do list. Again, that's just our name and completed object. We're going to add those using our add to-do element right here. So that's putting it into the DOM. That's going to be useful when we use local storage, which will be very soon. So we're filtering. Let's see what else. Type equals. Type is active. You find that one. Active there. If that is the case, I got this backwards here. Else if get to-dos. This time we specify to-do list dot filter, and we're only going to pass it the to-dos where the to-do is not completed. So instead of using the entire list, we're only passing it the ones that are completed. Let's say line. This last one, we can say else if type is completed. And we want to do much the same, but this time we actually want those that are completed instead of the ones that are not completed. Let's check that out. Let's add some of this. Great. Active. That's active. Completed. That's not completed. All. We're showing both. Perfect. Although we want to have our boxes show up whenever we click on them. All right, then to get that to work, we just need to get all our filter items and tell them to remove, if they have it, the selected class. And then we only want to add the selected class to the current target event, which we'll get even if we don't pass it in there. It's appreciated, but that will work. So refresh. We can add test do, and now our boxes are not showing up. Let's see what the problem is. All right, there we go. So I think there was a change with the name here. Now if we mess with it, it has the box. All right, all selected is our local storage. So that's a simple task. What we can do is just add a OS to the window on before unload. Right, we can just do storage set item. We'll just call it to-do list. So that's stringify our to-do list. And we'll copy this and just change this last part to onClose. So this just means that before the page refreshes, if you attempt to refresh it, it's going to save whatever was there into our local storage, and this is going to stringify our array of objects so that the local storage can store because it can only store strings. On close, we'll do the same thing here, except it will save it whenever you close out of your tab. And then I just call get to do so that it will load our to-dos list, which we are parsing. And this just means if this resolves to nothing because local storage does not have that set yet, then it's just going to be an empty array, which is good. Get to-dos and go ahead and set our number of tasks left. Now, if we look, everything is working as it should. I hope y'all enjoyed this tutorial.